Like I said, if you didn't finish it, it's okay because it's you. I wanted to kind of have it as a you to have it as a Word document so you could save it or modify it or do whatever you'd like. Again, Brian Caffarella, thank you so much for meeting with me. I have another survey question for you here, and let's see if this works. I have never tried this on a PowerPoint, so I want to see if this actually works. If you are you able to click that link and answer that question? And this is the first time I've ever done this. Okay, on a PowerPoint, and if okay, yeah, that's I was afraid of that. Works in the classroom, but I guess not quite on the PowerPoint though. So yeah, let me try to put it in the. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, let me try to put it in the chat and see if that actually works. Get the link here. Oh, there we go. Copy. Let's try that. All right. Let's see if that works. Is that working? To try to click the link in the chat. Good, good. It's a one question. Yeah, it's a one question. Awesome. Okay, so it worked in the chat, not in the. Like I said, I've done this in the classroom. Like I said, but never where people have had to do it virtually on a PowerPoint. So there's something right. We learn we learn as we go, don't we? Okay. So the question, and we're going to talk about that right away. So the answer to the question was what percent of students experience some kind of math anxiety? And I agree with that, that it could be, depending on the class, but really math anxiety to some degree, it's actually over 90%. Over 90% of students report experiencing, some kind of math anxiety. Anxiety, of course, is on a continuum. Some, students feel nerves, really stressed about going to class. Some it's to the point where they feel ill, they avoid even going to college because of math class. So it's really on a continuum, but to some degree, it's over 90% of students report experiencing some kind of math anxiety. So, one thing I think that's important to address is how do we engage students? Because that's the conundrum, right? We want to make sure that we're engaging students, but at the same time, understanding this daunting issue of math anxiety. So I wanted to kind of share with you a and I think this is specifically. I saw the question specifically with math anxiety, specifically with math anxiety. Certainly, there's correlations to dealing with anxiety in general, but yeah, we're talking specifically about math anxiety, and even as opposed to other classes, more so in math anxiety. I want to share with you a survey that I give the first day. And these are just some generic questions that I answer. But one question is, how would you feel if I were to call on you in class without you raising your hand or without raising your hand? And it's really incredible, the number of responses that I get. I mean, the responses vary. Some are like, it's okay. Some are like, you can do it, but you probably won't get the right answer. But a good degree, a good percentage of like, please do not call on me. Okay, please. This is like my fear of going to a math class. Please do not call on me. So it's something that I take into consideration. It's always such a great measure of growth when I'll see students who were like, no, please don't call on me. And then later, weeks into the semester, or, actually do start raising their hand and kind of volunteering. So that's kind of nice. So how can we kind of like, engage those students who, do have the anxiety? And one way is kind of like how I engaged all of you. The survey questions. Survey questions. If this was a in-person webinar, one thing I would have done when I asked you that question about what percentage experience math anxiety, I would have said turn to the person next to you and give your answer, and then one can maybe volunteer to give the answer. But by turning to the person next to you, by talking to each other, we're engaging students. That's called the pair share technique. It's been around a while, since 1981 to be exact, but kind of great way to kind of, first of all, get students to talk to each other, but also engage. Something else I use is the Remind app, which I'm very happy to work with people if they'd ever like. Just curious, have people used the Remind app? Is that something that you have heard of, or kind of sounds familiar? The Remind app is a way where you can text students back and forth. It's pretty easy to sign up for. They sign up for it, and ultimately, you create a class, and they basically just text to a phone number. It's actually a 5-digit phone number. They text the information to that number. And they already have the gosh darn phones out in class, and I find that's a way where I'm sometimes say, like, okay, text me your answer. Text me your answer. Let's text me your answer, and I can kind of read the answers off. Creates a little bit of anonymity where students who might be a little bit afraid to raise their hand, but yet they are participating. So the Remind app is really kind of a great way to do this. And something else is the 1-minute essay. This has been around in various forms for a while, where I'll just, have students on a piece of paper write down, so what have you learned in class? But what would you like to learn? What are the muddy points? What are some, uh, topics, issues, especially I'll do this like on a review day before a test, that you feel we need to go over. Again, kind of works a little bit better than raise your hand and ask me a question, which I hope that they would do. But with these anonymous surveys of like, okay, what would you like to talk about more? That's a great way to kind of get them engaged. That 1-minute essay where they write about, number one, what have I learned? Because it makes them feel good about accomplishments when they actually write down, like, hey, I never really understood how to solve a quadratic equation before. I'm getting that now, but I'm still really muddy on this word problem. I'm still very, I need to work on this word problem. Yeah. I'm always very happy to work with people on the Remind app, but it's a great way, like I said, and again, number one, it's a great way for you to get messages across to your class, because people don't check emails like they used to, right? Myself included. So it's a great way, number one, for you and your students to communicate to each other. But again, using the phones in class. Hey, pick up your phone and text me your answer. Text me a question. Text me a thought on this. Oftentimes, what I will do is I will put up a new problem, new question, and I want to know, what about this confuses you? What about this problem really confuses you? In calculus, the first question, one question came up of, what is the slope? What is the equation of the tangent line? Okay, tell me what's confusing about that. And of course, it's the word tangent, right? When you kind of dig down into it. So again, but I'll say, just, text me. Okay. And yeah, I appreciate that. I'm seeing some tidbits on others as well. Okay. So some root causes of math anxiety, some causes, some suggestions, why. There's a big reason we're going to get into in just a few minutes about, why, especially as opposed to other subjects, does math have so much anxiety. Past experiences. I wish I came up with this term, but I didn't. A math bully. When it comes to math experiences, this could be a teacher who really made life miserable for a student, made them feel really dumb or stupid. Could be classmates who laughed when they got the wrong answer. Could be a well-meaning parent who just was trying, but just frustrated that that he or she couldn't help the student. And yeah, is math anxiety learned? I really do think it is. I really do. I think it's not something that students enter, let's say, kindergarten with. It's something it's developed over time, just through bad experiences, like what I just mentioned. Through failure, through getting ridiculed, through just feeling humiliated, just feeling like you just couldn't do it over time, because yeah, it's not really reported where students enter, preschool or kindergarten like fearing or hating math. It's unfortunately through these experiences. A big one is math terminology. Okay, now I want you to take a look at this for a second here. And I want to, because, we say math terminology like it's some technical thing, but I think it's something that maybe we all kind of could relate to. And let me just pull this up here because, oops, it sounds like something that, okay, only students really deal with. Okay. Are you seeing this?
Let me ask you one question. Do your friends ever have a conversation and you just nod along even though you're not really sure what they're talking about? I'm telling you, it's totally unconstitutional.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
He deserves a Nobel Prize.
Oh,
no!
I mean, it was like the Algonquin kids table. Excuse me.
And do many of us feel like that at times, right? I'll ask again, do we all kind of feel like that a little bit at times? I'm going to share something with you, and I hope this doesn't lower your opinion of me. But when I was in my 20s, I joined a church group, and it was a very great experience. And I think you've probably had the experience where when there's a group of people that, hang out together, spend time together, there's one person who kind of tends to drive the conversation, where the conversation goes. And understandably so, it was the leader of this particular church group, and he loved to talk about healthcare. So in my 20s, I'll admit it, I knew nothing about healthcare, nothing. I was completely ignorant about any kind of like healthcare. Uh, all I knew is I went to the doctor. They said, Brian, yo, $40. Here's a check. That's it. Now, I want you to do something for me here. If anybody knows, can you take a few seconds and bombard me do this in the chat, with healthcare terminology? Anybody know some healthcare terminology that you want to bombard me with? Make me relive this experience. Anybody have some thoughts? Okay. All right. Thank you. Especially the acronyms. Oh my goodness, the acronyms. Yeah, this guy loved to talk about HMOs. It's like every fifth word, HMO. But do you know what my biggest fear was, even in my 20s as a professional hanging out with this group, is that I was going to hear, Brian, what are your thoughts? Brian, and I was kind of new to the group. I was also kind of new to I'd moved to Ohio at the time. Brian, what are your thoughts? And it's like, no, please do not say that, because I had no idea. So this is really kind of how how our students feel when they hear coefficient, constant, term, quadratic equation, right? Tangent, things like that. So, I try to really drop in the definitions so that students don't struggle, because that's just a huge issue with that, just that math terminology, because it's just incredible how, even though maybe they should have known it from another class, it just really, slope, right? Rate of change. I mean, things like that. There's just so much math terminology. Probability, with replacement, without replacement. I had a student saying to me one time, what are we replacing? What are we not replacing? So little things like that. And, fear of failure, it's just so incredible how we as humans fear feelings. And yeah, we are afraid of that. And, I just saw the question a while ago about, is math anxiety learned? And no, there's really no proof that it is learned. I'm sorry, it is learned. It's not, it's not innate. It is learned. And there's no proof that it's innate. It's basically learned through humiliation, but also that fear of failing at something. And I think as people, we have that as well. I personally I love in my class, I get excited over wrong answers, and I welcome wrong answers. And I like, for example, to just list answers that students have come up with. And again, this is where the Remind app kind of helps, where students can kind of text me an answer if they're afraid to do so. But I always like to come up with positive, even though an answer might be wrong. For example, we were talking about linear programming in one of my classes, and we were talking about the setup of a word problem, the interpretation of the lines of constraint, like y equals, x plus 5. And, what's, even though this is the wrong answer, what can we learn from this? Okay. I love that. Mistakes allow things to happen. That's so awesome. That's so awesome. And of course, ambiguity. Now, I just as I share something here, I have a question for you. I worked with a professor. Actually, when I was a student, there was a professor at my college who, when a student would say, "I don't understand," she would lose her mind and say, "Don't tell me you don't understand." Now that sounds like the demonic math professor from you know where, right? Like we're talking about math anxiety right now. I don't understand. Don't tell me you don't understand. Why do you think she I don't understand led her to, that going crazy? Any thoughts on that? She by the way, she was actually a really good professor. Might disagree with her reaction, but there's a reason for that. Let's see here. Very good. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, the ambiguity. It wasn't specific enough, right? Yeah, she needed details. We're recently, I don't know if other schools are doing this. We use eLearn on our interface right now, and we're changing to Canvas. And I'm one of the course coordinators, and it's been kind of frustrating. And I've been hitting some roadblocks. And when I hit the roadblock, I mean, I could have gone to our IT and said, "I don't understand this. Why are we doing this?" But no, you have to kind of zoom in. And I think that's where we have to really work with students on a very specific question on detail. So like I have here a list of steps of solving equations with parentheses and fractions. Students love those, don't they? Right. And that's kind of, I think, where I try to work with my students on. It's like, instead of "I don't understand," okay, let's kind of zoom in on what it is. Is it step 3? Was it going from step 2 to step 3? Was it going from step 1 to step 2? Did it not make sense why we're multiplying everything by 12? Okay. Did it not make sense, even with removing the parentheses where we got the 2/3 x and whatnot? Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. Where did it fall apart for you? But so important. And I think when we get into the "I don't understand," that kind of increases the anxiety, right? Whereas when we kind of zoom in and focus on it and where did it fall apart, just looking at it, that's exactly where I think we can help students. And also just want to show what can sometimes happen is when they look at different sources, things can kind of look a little different. So if I go to, which I use a lot with my students, if I go to ChatGPT, let me get there. Here it is. And I put this, whoops, sorry, I think let me bring you there with me. So that same problem that I just showed you, I just showed you a list of steps, right? So now I'm in ChatGPT and I have asked ChatGPT the question, "Hey, students use that," right? Now, if you'll notice, right, I didn't have that up for very long, but if you notice, ChatGPT did this a little differently than I had done it, let's say in class, right? They distributed, but what did they do? They combined before they cleared the fractions. I personally prefer to clear fractions before I combine like terms. That's just me. But again, that can also make things a little confused. There's so much information. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later too. There's so much information for students, but sometimes seeing things different ways can kind of frustrate students. So it's also important. I also think with AI sources like ChatGPT, there's a misconception that like once I go on ChatGPT or an AI source, everything's going to be okay. It's going to look all clear and easy to me. It's going to solve all my problems. And this could even confuse students because, again, this looks different a little bit than we did in class. So that's why the zooming in is just so important, that students can kind of zoom in and diagnose, what their issue was. Okay. Okay. So what do you think is the biggest reason? If you had to come up with the biggest reason for non-success in math, what do you think it would be? Take a few seconds. Can you drop me some lines there about the biggest reason for for non-success? Or give me some reasons for non-success in a math class. Let's see here. Yeah, poor placement, not trying. Yep, don't know how to communicate, not enough time, lack of effort, ask confidence. Oh, yeah, weak foundation. Fear, yeah, the anxiety kind of gets in the, oh, yes. Boy, we could really talk about this. Generally, though, here's the thing. You can have a high IQ, you could work your hardest, but you know what? And you could have a great teacher. Yeah, I agree. Bad teacher could be the reason. So you could be confident. You could have a great teacher. You could work your hardest. You could spend all your time. All right. But if you don't have the proper prerequisite skills, not going to help, right? Not going to help. This is just a drum that I feel like I've beaten for many years. It frustrated me, I'd say, for several years because it really kind of seemed like, there was so much push. And I know 6 developmental math classes leading up to a college level class did not work. Clearly didn't work. And, there's been positives about booster courses or co-requisite courses. But what's really concerned me for several years, I feel like there's been some backpedaling, was just the overlooking of prerequisite skills and foundational skills. And, when I've given advice to students about, I'm worried, I'm scared about taking my first college level math class. And my advice is, okay, your question needs to be, what content, whether it's college algebra, basic algebra, quantitative reasoning, what is the prerequisite material? What material do you need to know before coming into this class? And what can you get examples of that? So, talk to advisors, talk to teachers, but before going into that math class, what is just some content that you can study and go over and make sure that you are prepared? I wrote an article a few years ago, and I think I gave this example even, and I just kind of pleaded with whoever was reading it. And I'm like, okay, I get that, we've seen that there are positives with co-requisites, with booster courses, or just-in-time remediation, but it's like, this is a college algebra question because, for a while we were hearing I had a colleague once, and I can still hear his voice. He was very pro, like, let's, eliminate standalone developmental education. And I can still hear his voice right now. Put them all in college algebra. Put them all in college algebra. I don't think I'll ever escape that. But my rebuttal is like, this is a college algebra question, and this is the content you have to know. And I've said, maybe I'm like doubting Thomas. I'm like, show me how somebody who doesn't understand multiplying polynomials, linear equations, how to solve a quadratic equation. Yes, we can help them, but how can a student who doesn't understand this solve this problem? Okay. Just-in-time remediation helps some students depending on, how their foundation is, but they have to have the prerequisite skills. And not having those prerequisite skills is really, I saw poor placement, just weak foundation. That is really what ultimately leads to biggest thing that leads to failure. Okay. So we talked about what personality were you? Hopefully, if not, we'll get you that survey. Yeah, students have and you have a math personality, sir. Math personality. We kind of all have them, and students are always kind of amazed to figure out. Oh, I have a math personality. Yeah. And it's always hard to answer that survey as teachers, because I think without even knowing it, we try to kind of accommodate all of our students. So we kind of have to almost think back to how do we best learn math. But yeah, here's kind of and you kind of saw that on the end of the survey. I had that, like the different math personalities. But let me give you a little bit of a little anecdote here. So I had 2 students a number of years ago in an intermediate algebra class, and I'll call the girl Jen and I'll call the boy Mike. And they were both good students, but they drove each other, the rest of the class, and me crazy. Now, here's the thing. They were both really good students, but Jen was, okay, what's the formula? What's the step-by-step process? Where do I start? What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the answer? Mike wanted to have conversations about real life applications, about discussions of why does this work? Why does that not work? Is there another way to do it? And it drove the two of them, like, again, they were both really good students, but it was like, it clashed. And sometimes a student and a teacher, the personalities can clash. And this could be like a primary reason. And it's not bad. But so it's not really necessarily that it's bad. I would say to be a good math student, you really kind of have to be open to both aspects. Being strictly one or the other can really be problematic. So we kind of have to be, even though you might lean towards one or the other. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there, Donna. That's definitely a good point. And if there was, and I mean, maybe there's other topics as well, but I just find if there was ever like a specific topic where you have two ways of explaining something, and it kind of separated the personalities, factoring. And there's factoring by trial and error. Who else is old like me and still calls the other method the AC method? Anybody else old like me? I looked on ChatGPT, and there's actually other terms for it. There's like the splitting the middle terms. There's the factoring by grouping. Yeah, I'm old, and I called it the AC method because you do start off by multiplying A times C. But the AC method is really, I would say, preferable to the quantitative thinker because it's very methodical. It's very step by step, right? Whereas the trial and error kind of is more of a bottom up, and it is that it's kind of, and if you saw one of the questions on the survey, right, it was it gets messy. We have to try these numbers in, and it can get messy. Something works, something doesn't work. We have to kind of keep track of it. So I just point this out because this is kind of one method I think that really kind of separates the two learners, and where you can see one could actually get frustrated. Now I think so yeah, it's interesting to think about what personality you gravitate to, but also it's the challenge of our job, and it is a challenge, and I think it's just something that we accept. Is how can we accommodate both students, and how can we sort of like, accommodating the quantitative thinker? I don't dare I say really isn't as challenging because that's the step-by-step process. I find more maybe I shouldn't I don't want to generalize here, but I find maybe accommodating the qualitative thinker maybe a little bit more challenging, and maybe that's because as a math student I tend to be more quantitative. Maybe that's the reason. So I firstly find AI resources like ChatGPT I have found that to be very helpful. Sometimes I have found with real life, when I try to do real life examples, I tend to be a little one-dimensional. I remember I had a student that even said, could you give us another example of like, I think I was using whatever I was talking about, sign numbers. I was using money. It's like, could you give us another example? I'm like, okay. And that's where I find that's where we can really use AI resources to kind of enrich ourselves. Of course, I say that, and here comes an example with money. But this is, an example I found with, where we could explain negative times a negative is equaling a positive, right? Because that's one of the rules that why people hate math. Why is a negative times a negative a positive? But, we can see here how you remove a debt, right? You remove a debt. And it becomes positive. So that's just kind of something that we can embed to kind of help the qualitative thinker. And I also just want to share with you something I just actually did recently this week in my business calculus class. We started studying the second derivative, right? And I sometimes in my class, I go into acting modes of where I'm going to assume the role of frustrated student, not to make fun of anybody, but I'm going to be frustrated student who, let's face it, because I know some of you feel like this. So we started talking about double derivatives, and we did an example. Now, they all understood it. They were like, oh yeah, second derivative, you get the first derivative, and then you get the derivative of that. And then I went into my role of frustrating student. I said, why? Why do we have to get the second derivative? Who cares about the second derivative? We understand the first derivative, that's about progress. That's about, like, for example, at 20 weeks, we can see is our revenue increasing by a certain amount per week? Is our profit increasing or decreasing by a certain amount per week? That's what the first derivative tells us. It tells us the progress, increase or decrease at a certain point in time. what the heck do we need the second derivative for? Who came up with this, right? This is torture. So, I just kind of quickly segued into this example, advertising example that you can kind of see here. And I had the students compute the first derivative, and we talked about the interpretation again, what that meant. Okay, so that at when we've invested, because maybe this is you and your job, you've invested $20,000. You are seeing an increase of $720,000. Per every $1,000, right? At 23 weeks, you're seeing an increase of $724,500, per every $1,000. Then I had them compute, even though we didn't know what the heck it meant, the second, we had computed 20 to 24 into the second derivative. And we talked about, well, what do you see in terms of patterns? And, the students kind of, talked to each other, pointed out, oh, well, yeah, we're seeing negatives. But then I asked them to kind of compare it to the first derivative. And yeah, one student said this doesn't increase consistently. It kind of goes up to where X is 22 at $22,000. Then it kind of peaks and it goes down. Kind of same thing happens with the second derivative. Same thing at 22, goes to 0, right? And then it just goes down. So we talked about how the second derivative kind of tells us how the slope, we're still increasing. You're still, the amount of money, your amount of revenue, or the amount of sales per every $1,000 is still increasing, but it's increasing at a decreasing rate. It's increasing at a decreasing rate. And your bosses are not going to be very happy with that if it's increasing at a decreasing rate. So it's important to know, and again, we get to the point of diminished returns, right? The point of diminished returns. When do we stop? When do we stop putting money into that fund, right? At a certain point, we need to stop. Otherwise, it's going to be increasing, but increasing at a decreasing rate. We're not making as much. So that was, kind of, my attempt to kind of help both the qualitative and the quantitative thinker. Okay, let me get back here. Whoops. Bring you back to the PowerPoint here. So a couple things that we'll sort of like I won't spend as much time on. I had a couple of other ideas that we could even do like full webinars on. And this is one of them, like how to help students in the 2020s. Because taking a math class just is not, when I took my first math class in college, it was like, let's see. First of all, is everybody seeing this? Right. Okay. All right. Good. Okay, good. Just thought you disappeared there for a second. Anyway, yeah, it wasn't the same as when I took a placement test. I placed into the class, and that was it. And students now have just so many choices, right? There's just so many options out there, so many resources, and we really need to help students, I feel, kind of make the right choices because of all the resources with technology. So, the thing is, anybody can make a YouTube video, right? Okay. Now, people talk about math anxiety. You know what I have? I have philosophy anxiety. Okay. I had to take this graduate ethics class when I was going for my PhD. I'm sorry, it was one of the worst experiences I ever had. I, thou, the self, and the other, these states of being. Okay, you want to know what my thoughts are? In terms of like the self, that's me. In terms of the other, I guess that's you. In terms of like my state of being, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Can we stop talking about this right now? Now, that being said, do you want me making a YouTube video educating people on philosophy? Based on what I just told you, I don't think so, right? But anybody can do it, right? So we really want to kind of educate students, I think, on what are good resources for math. There's a lot, and I'm sure you probably have some, but Khan Academy we know is very solid. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this gentleman, Brian McLogan. Has anybody heard of him? He has a free YouTube videos. He mainly does algebra, pre-calculus, trigonometry, geometry. Heck, I've even watched his videos just to kind of help myself get better. This guy is dedicated, man. He actually goes in, he's a high school teacher, and he actually goes into his empty classroom during the summer and makes videos. So he's dedicated. Well, either that or he has young kids and he's just happy to get out of the house. Maybe that could be it too. But anyway, no, I'm sorry. I kid. He's definitely a very dedicated individual and just such a great teacher. So that's somebody who I would recommend. But yeah, I think we absolutely have to do that. And navigating, like I said, navigating ChatGPT. I'm always pulling up ChatGPT in my class, like I just did with that previous example. There is one more thing on ChatGPT I do want to show you. I have to remember that with the math personality. Also with this is something I think we could do maybe another video on or another webinar on sometime, just the pros and the cons of the different modalities, face-to-face. What are the pros and cons of face-to-face classes? What are the pros and cons of an online class? What are the pros and cons of the Emporium model? And again, that's something I think we can, maybe we can flesh out at another time, but that's just, I think, very, very important to kind of educate students on that. Okay, now I have a question for you. I have from my research, the 7 most deadly hated math. Okay. I didn't even finish the question. Let's see here. Okay. I'm going to see how many of you okay. I'd be disappointed if you didn't say fractions. I'm just looking at the, fractions, LCD, slope, fractions, plus, decimal. Okay. Decimals. Okay. Take a couple minutes, log. Okay. Yes. Okay. And I should have been a little more specific, but I think you guys are getting the picture. I should have been more like this. We're talking mainly arithmetic, algebra, maybe geometry topics, but I think you guys are getting the idea here. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I would say definitely when you get to calculus, definitely with the proofs. So I should have narrowed my question down a little bit, but I think you guys got it. All right. You ready? Here we go. Yep. you knew that was number 1, right? Laws of exponents. Yeah. And kind of like, why do we need to learn this? Especially with the laws of exponents, like why in the heck is x to the second times x to the third, and I am multiplying this x to the fifth, right? I mean, and of course we know, and that's where the kind of the breakdown of the explanation would help. But yes, it's more like, why am I learning this? And it doesn't make sense. Probability, yeah, overall probability, like with replacement, without replacement. Probability also deals so much with fractions, right? I mean, even the most basic probability is a fraction. Yep, you said it. I had a graduate professor who I think said it so well that factoring is about numbers. It's numbers. What multiplies to 18, but then, of course, what also adds to 3. And if students don't have number sense is thrown around so much. And to me, number sense is just, do you know your math facts? What multiplies to 18 and adds to 2? That's number sense right there. If you had to ask me an example of number sense, that's number sense. And factoring is just so much based on, so it exposes weak number sense. Yes, slope of a line. Geometry, but very specifically the angles and the lines and the planes can really confuse people. And of course, word problems. Absolutely. This is a topic where I think we could even do a whole other webinar on. In my research, I've written a lot about this. And like what we could do to really help students with these very specific topics. So I think for another time, this would be another, I think, great webinar to really flesh out why, I kind of talked about a little bit, but why these are so bad and what we could do to kind of help. Okay, so now test taking tips. Now let's face it, if students didn't have to take tests, there really probably wouldn't be a lot of math anxiety, right? So we kind of have to talk about test taking tips. You've probably heard of fight or flight, where, and we all face this as human beings, where we encounter a situation that makes us scared, for lack of a better term. Yeah, scared. And our bodies, right? Our brain kind of prepares our bodies to either fight, right? We all see the movie, right? Where, the person is in like a dangerous situation and you got to fight off the villain, right? Or flight, like run for your life. Okay. And the thing about it is neither of those apply to taking a math test, right? You're not going to fight your instructor. Well, if you run out of the room, you're going to fail the test, right? But your body is reacting. I mean, that's why students will say, hey, look, I got the test. I don't even remember my name. And it's like your body is reacting to you're in the middle of the street and you just saw a grizzly bear. An intruder I don't want to make light of this. An intruder just broke into your home, right? An armed intruder just broke into your home. So, I mean, you are scared, but your body your brain is thinking that this is like a life-threatening situation. So to kind of combat that, I recommend students use what's called the data dump. The memory dump has different names. Anybody familiar with that? The data dump. I'm going to show you an example of that in just a minute. Is that something that you've seen before? It's been around for a while. It has different names, and so obviously, students generally are not allowed to use formulas for an exam. But what they can do is spend the first 5 minutes or so just write. Yes, that's exactly it, Lisa. Where you can write down some formulas, ways of remembering things that are going to help you. Remember the material. And it's not something I tell students, don't wait till you get your test to do this, because you all complain that you don't know how to study for a math test, obviously, besides practicing the problems. But how about a few days before the test? Practice the data drop off. I have an example or a sample of that right here. I did this with like more arithmetic and pre-algebra. And here it is. But this is something that, just an example of a data drop off. Now, you might think, okay, so how could students get to a point where they could do this right before the test? Practice, 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 practice. Don't just wait till you get your test and do this. This is something that you can kind of practice. Now, here's the thing, right? You do this right before the test because, again, you have practiced it. And what will happen is you're not worried about question number 9, which deals with the laws of exponents, question number 5, which deals with slope. It's there waiting for you. And do it before you've even answered a question. Don't just, don't, because it's when you read the first question that might freak you out. That's when the anxiety, the fight or flight sets in, right? A few deep breaths. I just saw that here. Let's do our data drop off. 5-10 minutes. This is there waiting for you. Okay. This is there waiting for you. So I found students have been kind of very successful with this, and it can really work for any subject, any whether it's calculus or college algebra, anything like that. Something else is that then I have something very embarrassing I'm going to share with you. So I often give the example of, hey, listen, we've all had the experience of going to a party, a wedding, something like that, social event where there's somebody there that you don't want to see, right? You're dreading. We're as people, we dread sometimes going to these events because there's just somebody we don't like, bad history, something like that. Now, I ask my students, do you go right over to that person when you're nervous about going and be like, "Hi, how are you? Can I sit down?" No, of course not. What do you do that makes you feel better? You go over to somebody who you are friends with, you feel comfortable with. And what happens when you talk to the person who you are comfortable with? You feel more at ease. So, same thing with a test. If question number 1 is an uh-oh question, don't do it right away. Scan the test and do that question that you are just going to knock out of the park. Maybe it's question 9 and you do it, you're a rock star on that, your confidence is going to go up. Do another question. Do another question. As you keep doing questions that you are more comfortable with, that's going to increase your confidence. Whereas if you get stuck on something right away, what's going to happen is your anxiety is going to go up. So do the question. Now, for qualitatives learners, or something else I've researched a lot, are different types of learning style, different types of learning styles. That's what I meant. The kinesthetic learner. Some people love to learn through like song or dance. I am not that, but let me give you an embarrassing story here. So when I was studying for my doctoral comprehensives, I had this a huge essay that I had to essay question I had to answer. And not only did I have to answer the question right thoroughly, but I had to remember the sources, like who said what. Johnson said this, Sanders said this, Jacob said this. So I had to remember who actually said the stuff that I was writing, and I was having a hard time with it. So, okay, here's something. Now, I found myself, you're never in a million years going to guess where I'm going with this. I found myself saying according to a lot. According to Jacobs, higher education changed. According to Williams, this Higher Education Act worked. So there was this very annoying pop song that was out at the time. Anybody remember this? This was before satellite radio. I had to listen to commercial radio, so I had to hear a lot of annoying stuff like this. But how many times does she say according to? There you go. All right. Anyway, that's all I'll put you through there. All right. So I came up with my own song. I came up with my own song. According to Jacobs, higher education changed in 1890. Okay, that's all I'll put you through there. But you get my point. I actually came up with my own song where and that, it helped me remember like who said what, because it was just this according to. So unbelievable how that happens. So that's something that I can encourage students to do. We're gonna because I know it's about it's 3:50 my time. One last thing before we have like questions or whatnot that I wanted to share with you. I wanted to do this earlier on. Was with the math personality. If you're welcome to, if that's something that you want to explore more or use with your students, that's fine. But let's just say you don't really like those questions. I'm not going to be insulted, but I'm just trying to find ChatGPT because there's something else we could use with that. Okay, let me pull it up here and I'll just say that. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me go back and get you guys. I'm going to grab you and bring you over a ChatGPT, I think. Or maybe let me try this one more time here because I want to show you how you can make your own questions. Using ChatGPT. For some reason, it's just not letting me go back. We'll try this one more time here. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. It was actually right in front of me and I was just not seeing it. Okay, so you should be seeing ChatGPT right now. Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to bring you there and I wasn't seeing it. So that sometimes happens, right? We try to share the screen. Okay, so one last thing and then we can see what questions people have. So give me a 10 question, do however many you want, survey for quantitative and qualitative math personalities. Let's see. So you see, it came up with another survey. Actually, I'd have to look to see if any of the questions are similar to the ones I have. But look, a lot of them are different. So, you can use, I was amazed that ChatGPT actually knew this. I shouldn't have been, but yeah. So, if that's something you want to kind of pursue with, the math personality survey, certainly you can do that, but ChatGPT can kind of help you. I was amazed by that. Okay. I'm going to just see what questions people have. Yeah. Sorry about that, Kyra. Yeah, I know it's one of the, well, hey, if the song hadn't been running through my head, I probably wouldn't have passed my doctoral comprehensive. So, all right. So what questions or comments or kind of anything in the last few minutes? Just kind of looking through some of the comments that I might have missed. Yeah, I like that, Asma, that, you start with the problems, you know how to do, circle back to the ones. Yeah, manage your time. I have, I help, I tell students it's like a race. And the best way to really practice for a timed test is like practice like you would for a race. How long does it take you to do 15 or 20 questions? If it's taking you too long, then you have to practice more to use your time more efficiently. I just find the best way for a timed test is practice, practice, practice. other questions that that folks have that again, I'm kind of just also scrolling through some of the chat. Yeah, I do the same thing, Renee, with the practice tests. Absolutely. And you know, it's also something else too. Yeah, chew gum to lower the anxiety. Have a good meal. I tell students too, and I'm not a nutritional expert, but oh yeah, I'm going to answer that, Kristen. When if you have coffee, drink a bottle of water along with the coffee because caffeine will actually make you will make you tired after a while because it dehydrates you. Caffeine dehydrates you. So water will help hydrate you. So you have a cup of coffee, have water. No, I'm definitely not opposed to co-requisites. In fact, we use them. We've actually been using them for 10 years. I just feel with co-requisites, we've learned what many of us already knew was going to happen. There's positives, but co-requisites are not the be all and end all answer. Certainly, they help students because they are better. Just-in-time remediation is certainly better than 6 developmental math classes. Another positive with co-requisites is students are able to learn the material and apply it right away. Learning, for example, like in a quantitative reasoning, they learn slope of a line in the booster class, and then they're able to apply it right away to a linear regression. So there are a lot of positives towards co-requisites, but they help the very low level student? I don't think so, and they're just kind of not the be all and end all. I still don't really feel college algebra with the booster is always a good idea. I remember we were because again, math is just such a progressive just such a progressive discipline. It's built so much on prior material. I remember when co-requisites first came out, I attended a conference. It was a state conference here in Ohio, and this was all new. And there was a dean from another school, not a math person. And what happened was he was discussing how his faculty did not like the idea of the college algebra booster and he actually said they don't like the idea because math is linear. But when he said math is linear, you would have thought somebody had told him the world was flat. I mean, he was just in disbelief. Math is linear? What? And maybe linear sometimes is too strong of a term. Web-based progressive might be a little bit better, maybe a little gentler, so to say, but it's so much based on prior material. So no, not opposed to co-requisites, but I have never felt, and I think this has been proven, they don't really help 100% of the students. And I'm just kind of looking at some of the Yeah. Oh, interesting, Lori, about yeah, I think we've learned a lot on math anxiety. Um, Sheila Tobias, I want to make sure I throw out some names there. Cynthia Arem, we're kind of two founding members, I think, on the topic of math anxiety. They've certainly helped me with my research as well. And hi, Kelly.
Hi, I want to thank Brian. Our time is coming to an end. I just want to do a quick share. I have a couple of last minute bookkeeping things. One, again, thank you, Brian. I was a great webinar. I definitely have some ideas. I have some presentations coming up, so I'm going to be stealing some things. If you are interested in doing one of these yourself, if you were inspired in the chat when you were sharing your ideas, feel free to put in a webinar proposal or email me at my AMATIC address, and we can chat about what those ideas are and how to get that started. Otherwise, thank you. We all hope to see you in Philadelphia in November and at a future AMATIC webinar. We do have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks with Jessica Bernards. It's AI for Educators. So if you were intrigued by some of the things that Brian was sharing in terms of using ChatGPT, we'll get deeper into that. I've also just put into the chat the registration link for that webinar, as well as a session survey that we'll also be emailing out. So before you get going, if you want to open that session survey and fill it out, that would be great.
One question, Kelly, if it's okay. Is it okay if I'd like to attach the PowerPoint that I did if folks are interested?
Go ahead and add it to the chat. We'll also host it on the AMATIC website. Beverly answered a question that came up in the chat earlier for that. But
should I send it to you then, and then also put it in the chat here?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Just also has some of my, as Kelly mentioned, I'm very into research for best practices. So it just has some of my articles, my work that I listed on the subsequent slides if you're interested. So I'll attach that. But I'll send it to you, Kelly, if it's okay too, if you want to send that out.
Perfect. Yes, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, we got the PowerPoint in the chat, so I'll let everyone grab that before.
And I'll send it to you as well.
Perfect. Thank you. That being said, it is 1 p.m., so I'm going to stop recording.